I'm getting camera fright.
You filmed 3 of these videos.
I'm getting stage. I don't know what to say. What if they don't like me?
They'll like you.
It's a lot of pressure.
Well, they'll like you, I promise.
Okay. Hello, my Divergent darlings. I hope everybody had a good holiday for anybody who celebrates. It is the end of November, which means we're heading into the Christmas season. I know not everybody celebrates Christmas, a lot of people don't, but I think we can all agree that this is a very pretty time of year. I love the lights and I am super stoked for them. So some news, I am starting a Discord. For right now, we're offering donation-based early access, which basically just means you donate to the coffee, you get access to the Discord. That won't be forever. I can't say exactly when I'm going to be opening it up to the general public, but if you want access to it now and you don't want to wait for that, consider donating to my coffee if you want to support the channel and support the things that we do here. I would certainly appreciate it, and I'm really looking forward to getting to talk to everybody on Discord. So yeah, hope to see you over there. So for today's topic, I thought we would talk about something that has been a really big struggle for me in my life, and that is masking. Masking is the concept of hiding your neurodivergent traits. So it's typically used when talking about autistic people, but honestly, I think the term applies to a lot of different neurodivergencies. We all have this innate feeling of discomfort with being different, and I feel like we're all at some point punished for that difference. So we sort of learn how to hide it. We learn how to blend in and get around those difficult social situations that might cause us to be vulnerable and hurt for that vulnerability. Masking can have a lot of negative effects on a person. It can maybe also have some positive ones, but we can talk about that a little bit later. Some of the negative consequences of masking can include things like getting super burnt out, fatigue, social anxiety, depression, a general feeling of, I don't know who the heck I am because I'm one person in public and somebody totally different in private. For me, masking is one of the most exhausting parts of a late-term autism diagnosis. So I wanted to talk to you guys about the things that I did to, A, look at my life and realize, oh, that was masking, that was masking, that was masking, and oh, that's me. And then the decisions that I made as far as making the choice to unmask, or in some choices, not. So when I started to look back at my childhood with the lens of this was an autistic kid, I was able to start to finally put pieces together that I hadn't really been able to have context for in the past. For instance, I had this really specific memory when I was 14. I went to the Pride Parade in my city for the very first time. So, I had a lot of anxiety. I wasn't the type of kid that went into the city unsupervised, and I didn't really have friends that were normally the type to do that either. So when I got this opportunity, I took it, but I was very worried about how it was going to go. And the first half, it went really well. We had a really good time. It was great. But it was a pride parade. So it was loud, it was crowded, it was bright. There were a lot of intoxicated people. And I was in a very unfamiliar environment. By the second half of the day, I was burnt out. I was exhausted. On top of all of this, out of the entire group of girls that I went with, I only knew one of them. And she was somebody that I thought was very cool. So I tried really hard for her to think I was cool. So I was often very tired by the end of our interactions. Not that I didn't enjoy them, I did. I was just tired. And now there was a whole group of them that I was trying to fit in with. So by the second half, we're walking around the city and I am done. I'm done. My feet hurt. I don't feel good. I can't exactly articulate why I don't feel good. I just know that I'm not right. And I finally, when I can't go anymore, say to them, hey, could we take a break? I'm pretty exhausted. They all immediately turned and made fun of me for that. But I'm able now to look back on that and go, no wonder you were so exhausted. Not only were you overstimulated by everything, you were also masking really heavy. You had to think really hard about every word that came out of your mouth, every movement that you made, which is tough to do in the middle of a parade. So that's just one example of how having the framework of figuring out what your masking is really lets you put other things, other parts of your life into better perspective. The way that I figure out if I'm masking or not is I think back on how hard I worked to maintain those interactions. So, were these the kind of people that I could hang out with when I was tired? Were these the kind of people that I felt comfortable telling if I didn't feel well? Were these the kind of people that if they saw me interact with my family, I could be normal around my family? I didn't have to put on a front or anything. And when you ask yourself these questions, you really start to realize when you are putting up a mask and when you're being yourself. So obviously I masked a ton in school. In school, I tried my best to be as quiet as possible when I was around people I was uncomfortable with. When I had the opportunity to cling to somebody else and kind of let them steal the show, I did. When I was comfortable was only around a very select group of people, and even when I was with them, I worked very hard to mirror what I saw them doing. That was how I sorted through how to have social interactions. I dressed not necessarily in the way that I was comfortable how to dress. I just tried to dress like them, which didn't really work out for me because I didn't really know how to dress like them. All my friends were very artsy and fashionable, and I could not keep up, but I did try. And that was how I sort of got through school. And don't get me wrong, I had real friends. I did. But even around those real, true friends, there were times where I was masking. Maybe it wasn't all the time, but there definitely were times when I was, because I didn't want to let them know how easily I burnt out, how quickly I got tired, how many things actually bothered me. I had friends that were very chaotic, and I had to work so hard to not be bothered by their chaos. I had to hide just how much I noticed. And when you do that so much, when you are lying to yourself to such a degree, convincing yourself you are not bothered, you actually become disconnected from what you are actually experiencing. And because of that, I didn't realize I was feeling overstimulated. I didn't realize that I was socially burnt out. I didn't realize that I was putting up this front that was draining the life out of me. So I had no idea why I experienced the amount of depression that I did as a child and a teenager. I had no idea why I struggled so much with basic tasks. because I just wasn't in tune with myself and what I was feeling, because I didn't want to acknowledge those things. They were too big and too scary, and I was too afraid of the rejection that would come with admitting them. As an adult, I started to learn a little bit how to unmask, and I did this subconsciously. I did this just sort of by growing into myself. I still had meltdowns and I had no idea where they came from. I still hid a large amount of my discomfort, and I still tried really hard to have the sense of humor and the social engagement that I felt the people around me expected me to have. As a result, I tended to be very sarcastic because I wasn't good at other forms of humor. I didn't really understand them, and I tended to not connect with them, but I got sarcasm. It really wasn't who I was. It wasn't who I wanted to be. It just sort of kept coming out of my mouth because I didn't know what should be coming out. And when I finally got my autism diagnosis, everything sort of started to shift and change. I started to realize I was being somebody that I didn't want to be, but also, more importantly, I wasn't being who I was. And doing that was draining the life out of me. It was making me so depressed and anxious, and it was filling me with self-hatred. When I was ready, when I had done all the research and gone to the doctor, and I had that solid autism diagnosis, there came the time of asking, okay, what's next? I have this information, now what am I doing with it? And for me, the answer was unmasking. But not everywhere and not all the time. And here's why. Obviously, there are situations where I benefit from having the very strong masking abilities that I do. I am a very good masker, to the point that a lot of people don't believe me when I tell them I'm autistic, which isn't a positive, but it is what it is. So obviously I couldn't unmask in places like work, or I had to be very careful about how I unmasked. Also, I do feel that in certain ways my masking abilities made me a better friend than I might have been if I hadn't developed that ability. You know, an example of one way that I mask, not well, I struggle with it a lot, but one way that I mask is the way that I end conversations. I don't know how to end conversations. I don't understand the natural flow of them, and if it were up to me, once the last thing that needed to be said was said, I would probably just walk away. Okay, thanks. So I learned to ask questions as a way to kind of indicate that I wanted the conversation to be over without making that person feel that I was cutting them off. So I would ask a question like, was there anything else that you wanted to discuss? Or something like that. And I feel that if I were to just stop doing those things, I feel like some of my friendships might suffer, because I developed those things in order to make other people feel heard and comfortable and understood, and it is extra effort for me to do, but it's not necessarily wasted effort. So with all that in mind, the first way I decided that I was going to unmask is I made a list in my head. You can write it down if you want to. I'm too messy for that. But I made a list of the things that caused me the most distress. So what were the ways that I masked that drained the most energy from me? Because social niceties with my friends are not that draining for me, and they have benefit. Social niceties with my boss are very draining for me, but they have a lot of benefit. What were the things that really only benefited me because society is ableist and drained me enough that they weren't really worth it to continue. The way that I figured that out is I became hyper aware of all my social interactions. I mean, almost a scientist observing myself. I really paid attention to how I was feeling and how I was acting, and if I would say something and my brain would go, that's not how you really feel, or that's not what you wanted to say, why did you say that? I would take note of that. And at the end of that all, I realized one of the biggest things that I did was pretend to understand something that I don't get. It was exhausting because you have to keep pretending. You know, somebody tells a joke and everybody laughs and you laugh because you're like, haha, I do not get it, but I don't want you to know that I don't get it. But then somebody else builds a joke off of that and then you have to laugh at their joke and you still don't get the first joke, so you definitely don't get the second joke. And it just keeps going and going and going. And then you wonder, oh, should I try and contribute? Should I not? It's exhausting. It's too much. And it also frustrated me. Sometimes people would say things and I would not understand it so much. I found it made me angry. Like, what you said makes no sense. So I stopped doing that. I stopped doing it. When somebody would say something that didn't make any sense to me, I would look them dead in the eye and I would say, well, that's not true. I wouldn't look them dead in the eye, but I would make my presence known and I would say, I don't understand that. And they learned to explain it to me, and that was a huge energy saver for me, and it was a way that I finally got to feel a little bit more like myself when I was interacting with people. Once I got really comfortable with that and I wasn't catching myself accidentally slipping up, so to speak, anymore, I was pretty naturally being honest with that. I decided to move on to the second thing on my list, which was facial expressions. And that's still where I'm at now because that's a hard one for me. But I put a ton of energy into my facial expressions. A ton. And I think part of the reason that I did that is just because I did theater and it just was kind of like a natural expression of that. I also think it was because when you don't know what to say, but you want them to know you're listening, the answer that I came up with for that was make a face. You know? Like smile or nod or, you know, like do something that says I am listening and responding to this, even though I had no idea what you actually want from me here. So I put a lot of energy into my facial expressions, and don't get me wrong, I smile very naturally. I laugh easily. I think I'm an expressive person, but there's a difference between natural expressiveness and what I was doing, which was too much. Also, when you're masking, like I said before, there's that disconnect between your body and your brain. There's a disconnect between how you're actually feeling and what you're projecting. So I, a lot of the time, would react or emote in a certain way, and my brain would go, that's not how you feel at all right now. So I decided to try and be more honest with my expressions. And that's a scary one for me because I don't want to seem aloof or uncaring or dumb, honestly. I have this big fear that because I'm not responding in the way people believe is the correct way to respond, that people are going to think that I'm stupid, that I don't get it. So trying to find that balance between showing that I care, showing that I'm interested and invested, and that I get it, and not putting so much energy into the performance of body language is a tough one for me to balance. So that's where I'm at right now. And I think I'm slowly getting better with it. You know, if I have got the energy to spare at this point, I've still got enough people-pleasing tendencies that I'm willing to use the energy on the facial expressions. But if I'm not feeling at my 100% self, I have to decide, okay, where does my energy serve me right now? And if the answer is not my facial expressions, then I need to stop pushing so much into that. A lot of this is trial and error. A lot of this is you don't know until you know. You don't know what questions to ask yourself until those questions come up. So it's a fun learning process. It's challenging. It's a hard thing. It involves a lot of honesty and self-reflection and vulnerability. But it's really worth it. And I like the things that I'm learning about myself. Not necessarily in the sense of I'm applying a positive or a negative connotation to them, but just in the sense of I am happy to know those things. So yeah, it's a hard process, but it's worth it. My plan is, once I've got the facial expression thing down, the next way I'm going to work on unmasking is being more comfortable with stimming in public. Now, I have already started to do that. It's just kind of been a natural progression of being more comfortable with my autism diagnosis. But I definitely think that there are situations and times that I could get more comfortable yet. So that's my plan. Once I feel like I've got a good grip on showing the type of expressions when I want and how I want, I'll start to work on being cooler with the stimming. All this being said, if you are wondering, should I unmask? Here's my answer. Do you want to? Will you feel safe to? There are just times where you might not be safe to unmask, and that's okay. Well, it's not okay, but don't ever feel bad for it. It's not your fault that society is the way it is right now. And you don't owe anybody unmasking. You're not perpetuating ableism or lying to people by making the choice to continue to mask. You're not failing yourself or anybody else. It's a personal choice, and you have to do what's right for you. If you do want to unmask in every way or in certain ways, that's also amazing and beautiful. And I really wish you luck in that, because it really is freeing. It changes your relationship with yourself in what can be a really positive way. So the choice to unmask or not really truly lies with you, and there is no wrong answer. If you have any more questions about masking, if you felt like there was something that was confusing or something you would like explained more, please leave it in the comments below. I always try and answer as many as I can. Don't forget, I have a blog post going up for any and all coffee supporters. Alternative Monday, so since the video came out this week, my blog post will come out next Monday, and so on and so forth, which means YouTube, I will be seeing you again in December. So everybody, I wish you a safe rest of your November. I will see you soon, and as always, thank you very much. I'm happy you're here. See ya.